advance. I'm going to take very frequent coffee breaks because I got in at 1:30 this morning from Atlanta. So I'm running on these beans here at the moment, but I'll keep it as energetic and lively as I possibly can. As introduced, I'm Corey von Wallenstein from Dyn, and this is really about a story that we've been telling and has been unfolding for the last 2 years in terms of how we took a legacy SaaS product and rejuvenated a lot of life and revenue growth into it, and a lot of the real strategies and not so much horror stories, but success stories along the way. We thankfully found more success than failure in this endeavor. What we're really going to be talking about is the SaaS products that we sell on our e-commerce site, Dyn.com. We generated over $5,000 a month in new recurring revenue. It was over $6 million annually. And this represented about 40% growth on these platforms. Whereas historically, for the last couple of years before we took on these endeavors, we were seeing single-digit percentage revenue growth. The thing you have to remember about our services is we've been around since 1998. We were actually one of the first freemium models on the internet running a service called dyndns.org. And we undertook these efforts to really rejuvenate these platforms and get a lot more life and growth into them. But before we go into that, who are we? What do we do? At core, we are managed internet infrastructure as a service. So we power a global DNS network, and we power a global email delivery network. Everything that we're going to focus on here is our self-service DNS platform. We're 170 folks. Our headquarters are just about an hour north of here in Manchester, New Hampshire. And we bootstrapped the company over 14 years. We actually just accepted our first dollar of funding. It was a little more than $1 about 2 weeks ago from Northbridge to continue to grow the company and go onward and upward from here. So this is the product spectrum that we offer on DNS. The important thing to recognize, it's not so much what the product does, it's what the user does with it that we need to be clear on here. Because we basically have two very big, very different platforms that we run. We power websites like Twitter, Salesforce, Amazon, Constant Contact, a lot of the biggest brands that we all know and love. That's on our enterprise platform. Average revenue per user there is about $600 a month. I have hours of stories I can tell on how we drive revenues there and manage revenues there. But the exciting stories that I have in the revenue growth and bringing kind of a slowly maturing product back to life is actually in our home user segment with an ARPU of about $50 to $100 per year. And that's where we're going to focus in our stories. For us, there's this no man's land of revenue that lies in the middle between about $8,400 a year and about $100 a year. And we have no traction there. So if you're there, then my stories are irrelevant. So sorry about that. DNS at core is just names to numbers. It's mapping a name like twitter.com into numbers. This product that we're going to talk about and share the stories on is really a remote access product. It's for people to get a name like corey.dyndns.org and always have that map to their home computer, right? So they can do remote access. Maybe they want to host files from home. Maybe they want to share photos. There's over 4 million people around the world that use the product, and about 500,000 pay today for that product. And before we started these efforts, we only had about 200,000 people paying for that product and about 3 million users. So we've definitely done a really good job at converting a lot of those free to paid users, and we're going to tell some of those stories. This real talk is about patterns of behavior in SaaS. And what we learned by actually looking at the data, instrumenting the products, trying to understand what users were doing, and matching that up with different revenue tactics. And so the ones that we're going to talk about today are really two categories. We have renewal patterns, looking at when people renew, how they renew, and whether or not they forgot. And we'll share what we did to kind of tackle those issues. And we actually tackled those first, because what we realized, and as you'll read in kind of Rick's book, there's a case study on it, we were spending 4 to 5 times as much to acquire a new customer than it cost us to retain a customer. And we were seeing churn rates of about 35% annualized. And that was really, really high. And we knew that we had to tackle that. So renewal is what we tackled first. The purchase patterns, once we had renewal rates up into the low to mid 80s annualized, we started to look at what we could do to convert more of these free users into paid users and looking at their purchase patterns. So we'll talk about our lessons learned in freemium versus trials and when people go from free to paid. And then we have some advice on how you can find patterns, what specific tools you can go back and instrument and get some of your team to adopt and some of the things that we found that worked and things we didn't work. And then what are we exploring next? So this is really our talk for the day. So renewal patterns, first one that we wanted to look at. By instrumenting everything, we got a ton of information. And it was almost an information overload scenario. And it was a lot of people hammering on SQL, in Excel, writing command line tools, writing custom scripts in Perl and Python to kind of start to paint a picture of what was going on. The story that's in the book is really about how we set out on this effort to tackle these business problems, ended up building up all these tools along the way in order to do it, and then realized, why are we building something that we can't sell? Right? We're much better off buying this from an outsourced provider, and that's why we started to go out and evangelize and getting outsourced providers to start building some of these tools so that we can use it. We stop building themselves. But this is one of the most impactful lessons that we learned. What we were looking at is the percentage of services by day of the week that were not deleted. So we sell an annualized subscription. You pay us $20 a year for this product, right? And so you might buy this product on a Thursday. And a year later, well, actually, it would actually start 10 months later, we're going to start the renewal reminder process, right? So we're going to start this series of emails being sent to you to say, hey, your renewal's coming up in 2 months. You love us, right? Throw us a bone and you keep the service going. And that would be the first touch point in the renewal process for that customer to resubscribe for the following year. And then it was a waterfall, right? So then it was 30 days, and then 14 days, and then 7 days, and then 3 days, and then 1 day. And when we looked at which of those notices people took action on, I mean, how many people here in the 60, 30, 14, 7, 3, and 1 day, how many people wait for 1 to 3 days, right? I'm definitely guilty of that, right? It's just the way it is. It's like, hey, I have so much shit going on. I don't have time to renew every single thing the second it comes in. And you always wait until like that most urgent message, like your shit's gonna be deleted tomorrow if you don't do something. All right, cool. I'm gonna whip out my credit card to make this happen. And so what we were looking at is by day of the week, we saw drastically different, we called it a recapture rate. And this was really to separate the terms of renewal rate, because renewal rate meant something very different in our business. Recapture rate was of the services that were going to be deleted that day, how many were not, right? So if you look at the inverse of that, if you take the inverse percentage, you're looking at the percentage of services that were deleted that day, right? Because it was that anniversary of when it was purchased, they didn't renew, and so we're going to delete it. And so for Mondays, we would see recapture rates of around 72 to 73%, Tuesdays around 70%, Wednesdays low 70s. It was kind of like the story throughout like the work week, is that we would delete somewhere between 25 and 30% of services, and we would be able to recapture about 70 to 75% of those services. But when we compared that to the weekend, we saw very, very different patterns of behavior. We saw that more services were being deleted, right? And fewer users